of once Lynn has finished her session as well. I will invite Lynn to, I'll just add the spotlight to Lynn as well. And Lynn, if there is a presentation that you have, then feel free to share the screen as well. I'd like to welcome Lynn or Weslyn, who's the Director of Training and Learning at Suicide Prevention India Foundation, an organization that has been working in the area of suicide prevention and gatekeeper trainings for over 4 years and is a registered Section 8 company as well, organization as well. So I will let Lynn take over how to go about supporting someone who's experiencing suicidal ideation. Thank you, Lynn. And please continue with the presentation.
Right. I hope I'm audible to everybody.
Yes, you are.
Okay, I just wanted to give all of you a heads up that I'm having a bit of a throat irritation today, so I will be, taking care of myself, making sure I'm drinking water. I have a 1 hour, slot given to me to talk about supporting someone who is experiencing suicidal thought. So I want to start this with a different perspective, which is maybe a little different from what is, what all of you have been talking about so far. This is a statement shared by somebody who has been struggling with suicidality for so long. The individual said that suicide will always be an option, even a comforting one at times. And that is something that carers, that is, us, family and friends, and even healthcare professionals have a difficulty in getting their heads around. But it has certainly helped me through many a dark night. So this is the reality of, of what a person feels, when suicide is an option. As mental health, I'm a practicing mental health professional, and I believe there are some of you who may also be practitioners. We always talk about, how suicide should not be an option that a person is considering. But whether we, whether we can wrap our heads around it or not, to borrow those individuals' words, it is certainly an option that many people are considering. So people who have, it is very challenging to hear that, especially if you've not experienced a suicidal crisis personally. But we believe it's an incredibly important insight and one that we might, have to come to terms with. Someone who is experiencing suicidal crisis need to be empowered to help them find themselves and solutions that are appropriate for them. I'm not sure how we do that, as all of us have very differing resolutions as individuals, but it is important that we empower them. And we also remember that suicide, we know that suicide at its core is a crisis of self. So it may have been triggered by a recent event, but more likely it has a history where one more grain of sand, or one more, borrowing from the analogy, Sachin said, one more blow into the balloon has been added, and it begins to collapse or burst. So let's look at what are some of the ways when we are dealing with someone who is suicidal. I don't think I'm going to say anything here that is unfamiliar to all of you, but it is important that I just want to reiterate. It's not easy to care for a loved one who is suicidal. You might be overwhelmed by your own feelings about the prospect of losing them, or afraid of saying or doing the wrong thing. So offering compassion, empathy, and concern. So start a conversation by asking questions like, I've noticed you've been down lately. Would you like to talk about what's going on? Or how are you feeling? Or maybe you want to say, I care about your well-being, and I want you to know that I'm here to listen. So listening carefully without judgment, giving them your complete attention, acknowledging what they say, validating their feelings. This is very important, and I'm sure Sachin has been telling you all about it. But having that conversation with them, where you let them know that you care about them, what they're going through, and reminding them that you don't have to go through this alone. Would you tell me what are you struggling with at the moment, or asking them, how can I help you? And even showing that you care through your words and body language and actions are important. Again, being respectful of the individual. Do not make jokes. Don't say anything they don't take anything they say lightly. When I say that, there is a tendency for us to be like, oh, they're just joking, or they're manipulating, or they're saying those things just to incite me. It is important any conversations where they are talking about their suicidal wishes, we think of it as their cry for help. And anything, instead of thinking of it as attention seeking or help manipulative, if we remove the word attention seeking and we put that as help seeking, it will remind us to not take anything they say lightly or belittle what they say, because what they feel is their reality. It is their truth, and we need to be respectful of that truth. Acknowledging them, their pain, by reminding that their feelings of hurt are valid and that their life matters, and and that you really would like to, you care about their well-being, and you tell them, I care about your well-being. I want you to know that I'm here to listen. Asking them, is there anything that they like to talk about? All the while reassuring them that their life can get better. But we need to be mindful that we are not taking this positive, toxic positivity, tonality in our conversations. It's also important that we remain calm. It is very, very difficult when we are talking, if it is a loved one who is feeling suicidal. So do not be alarmed by what they say or what they do. You need to be the rock that they can be steady on. If they appear to be in distress, it is important that we do not leave them alone until they've calmed down. And if you're not a family member, the previous speaker was suggesting, it is important that we add as many people into the conversation, into team protect the individual. I use the word team because taking care of somebody who is suicidal is not a solo endeavor. It should not be a solo endeavor. And hence we need to add as many people into this conversation as possible. Sachin was earlier talking about, and when I joined and I heard the part where you're talking about confidentiality, even as a mental health professional, it is not, when we are talking to a client who may be suicidal, we do communicate to them that we will break confidentiality if they are, in three situations. If they're suicidal, if they're homicidal, or if they're abusing a child, or if there is, child abuse or elder abuse. So, or if they're abusing somebody who's neuroatypical. So the thing is that there is no, even at a mental health professional level, we do not promise confidentiality, blanket confidentiality. However, we do tell them that we will be talking to them. We will only be reaching out to one of their friends or family members who they trust, who they know will be, not judgmental about them. And many times in our practice, we also notice that these individuals come to us and say, oh no, there is nobody in my life I can talk to. There is no one in my life I can trust, or take support from. So that is when we continue to have conversations about the various, members in their family, or various relatives, extended family members, colleagues and friends, and continue having that conversation and exploring various relationships so that we can find someone they can trust with. And as we explore that, we realize that, that is when they start remembering, oh yeah, there is that aunt of mine who, when I did tell her something that was distressing, she was very compassionate about it. So while, when I say don't offer confidentiality or don't promise confidentiality, at the same time, I just want to gently remind all of you that we also need to be mindful about how we talk about that person's suicidal behavior or ideation to somebody else. We want to talk about it, using respectful and compassionate language, and not bring about a tonality of gossip or curiosity around it, but rather to encourage that other individual to be compassionate and be available for the person in case the person needs. Again, I cannot stress the importance of adding members, adding number of people into this group, into the team that is there to protect the person. Don't offer advice. Even as a professional, we do not offer advice. What we do is we help them arrive at solutions that are best suited for them. I want to get into more specifics, and I want to share with you some of the techniques that we use as mental health professionals, and that can also be used by, that is also encouraged to be used by, non-professionals to help someone who is suicidal. So there are three parts of this, three different techniques. One is the crisis or safety plan, hope kits, and suicide watch. So let's start with the safety plan. I just want to, okay. I'm going to stop sharing there for a minute. And I don't know what happened. Give me a minute, please. Are you all with me so far? Is there anything that needs discussion or clarity?
Going on, Lynn, we have asked them to write down any questions that they may have, which we can address towards the end.
Okay. Is this good? Am I back on?
Yes, you are.
All right. So crisis and safety plan. It is very different from what is, popularly known as a safety contract, because a safety contract is basically a contract where the client says that, it's a written document where they say that they will not attempt to kill themselves or attempt while they are in care, but it does not offer anything to the client. It's just a contract, and it gives a false sense of security for the practitioner. It does not provide it does not provide any support whatsoever to a client. However, a crisis safety plan one provides a good visual reminder of the person's warning signs, coping strategies, support system. It's a CBT technique where we use to move a person from a state of dependency to interdependence and finally dependency. So there are three clear aspects that we want to focus on. One is awareness, bringing their awareness into recognizing their warning signs. So we work with the client to identify thoughts, images, their thinking process, moods, and behaviors that precede a suicide-related behavior. So, we will ask them, like, how will you know when a safety plan needs to be used? Or, what are the thoughts or feelings that you need that usually come up when you are, before a suicidal crisis comes? So what sort of thoughts are there? And we ask them to write these down in their own words. So thoughts, images, moods, situations, behaviors, anything that indicate that a crisis is developing. So it could be like, it could be thoughts like, I hate myself so much, I shouldn't exist. So that helplessness, or the urge to drink alcohol, or digging near fingernails, or feeling that they have let a loved one down. So these are some of the thoughts. Next is where we are encouraging them to explore their internal coping strategies. So again, these internal coping strategies are we ask them, what can you do on your own if you become suicidal to help yourself to not act on your thoughts and urges? What are the activities you could do to take your mind off your problems, even if it is for a brief period of time? So again, here, these are internal coping strategies, which means that they are using their own skills without contacting another person. So what are the things that they can do on their own? So they may be like, I can listen to music or mindful meditation, go for a walk, or eating a comfort food. So we put that down. It's important that whatever we are discussing is put down in their own words. This helps us. We also ask them, we also have to evaluate the likelihood that a person will use this strategy. How likely do you think you would be able to do this at the time of that, intense crisis or intense urge? So sometimes they'd be like, I'd like to binge watch at that time. So again, identify the barriers in engaging these coping activities. For example, if they say that I will go to the library, or I like being in the library, but you notice that this individual is staying in the, or I'll go for a movie, if they said, and if you notice that the individual is living in a hostel and that has curfew timings, or living in an area that does not have easy access, or the person doesn't have easy transportation techniques, then that cannot be one of the options. So we need to understand what are the barriers that will be there in engaging in these coping activities. So it could be physical activities, relaxation techniques, anything that moves them into a more positive mental space. But these are activities that they do on their own. The next is using social contacts, like people or places, for support and distraction. So here is where they, when the client is feeling suicidal, they can socialize with their friends or families without explicitly informing that of the suicide state, or but it serves as a distraction from the suicidal thought. So they may include social groups like friends and family, or going into social places like a coffee shop or a place of worship. So again, we encourage the person to prioritize the list of these individuals and list of locations as included. So you can ask them, who is that goofy friend of yours who you may want to contact? And the person just launches into a joke, and then it helps as a good distraction. Or who helps you feel good when you socialize with them? Who helps you take your mind off problems, at least for a little while? Or where can you go where you'll have the opportunity to be around people in a safe environment? So again, at all conversations, we need to identify barriers that may that may prevent them from engaging in these activities. So they may say, like, the park behind my house, I really enjoy the flowers there, or listening to music, or I could walk over and knock on the door of my flatmate, for some coffee, or I could go to the gym, or I could, talk to my friend from school. So all of these places or people they talk about, it's important we write down their name and numbers, etc. Again, these are social contacts that they may not explicitly inform about their suicidal state. Next is what is called the emergency contacts. These are family members and friends who we have previously identified as part of the team to keep them safe. So this is the next step, where if they identify where they can explicitly indicate that they are in a crisis and need help. So among their friends and family members who they can contact during the crisis. And so ask the client about the likelihood that they would contact these individuals. So they may say, oh, I can talk to my mom, or I can talk to my uncle, but it's important we ask them what is the likelihood that they will actually contact. So, and also identify the potential obstacles and ways to overcome them. So if they say that I'll talk to my mother, but if you know that the mother has been, for example, been ill a lot lately, then obviously that's an obstacle. So you might want to suggest, or you might want to ask them to think of somebody else. So wherever possible, if the person is close to the client with whom safety plan can be shared, is best identified. Whoever we identify as these emergency contacts, they will have a copy of the safety plan that we are creating with them. Again, names and numbers and email addresses of the persons should be there. Next step, we include the professionals and other agencies. So, the previous list or the previous steps, they do not resolve the crisis, but they help serve as a good distraction for the individual. So at the first stage, we created awareness of their warning signs, the risk factors that increases their vulnerability to situations. And the second stage, we also explored what are the things that worked in the past. In the third stage, we talked about distraction. What are the places and activities or people that they can go to distract themselves from this crisis? And the next two stages are about safety, which is one, who are the people who can actually keep them safe while they're having a crisis, so they can talk and access these services. So make a list of the mental health professionals they can talk to, or the other mental health providers in terms of 24-hour support, urgent care facilities, or other emergency departments, as well as suicide hotlines. So making a list of that and adding that into the safety plan. The last stage is to reduce the potential use for lethal means. So examples of reducing access to the means include, storing away medication safely, implementing gun safety procedures. Now, earlier when we when we read about gun safety, it was not considered an important concern in the Indian context, but that seemed to be changing a lot. So, so that's important. Again, restricting their access to sharp objects like knives. Again, having that conversation with them, whether we decide, to decide whether to remove their means or restrict their access is important, and it depends on the lethality of the method that they've been talking about. So, ask the patient, or ask the client, or ask your friend, what means have they been considering to use during a crisis, and work together to identify the ways to limit their access to those means. Again, it is important that if they're a client, every time the client comes back, we ask them, did they have a crisis? And if they had a crisis, did the safety plan work? And what were the means that they were thinking about? So having that conversation routinely is very important. And sometimes, in case of clients with, a long history with suicidality, there is sometimes what is called a method of choice. These are methods that they are most likely to, use when they are in crisis. So understanding that and restricting their access to that is very important. For example, if they are in a place where there's a high open balcony, restricting access to that balcony or locking it and giving the keys to their neighbor. These are some of the ways that we can explore. Having that conversation at a very deep and detailed level is very important for the safety plan to work. And the next part is to, as we have this conversation about creating the safety plan, and like I said, all of this have to be discussed in detail and put down on paper. There are a lot of templates available online. One of the most popular one is designed by Barbara Stanley and Gregory Brown. So if you're using that kind of safety plan template can help you. Again, and if you are a practitioner, having the CTS, that is commitment to treatment statement, can be helpful. As you have this conversation, you also need to remind them and talk to them about their reasons to live. Things that remind them of the positive aspects of life. When do you feel at peace during the day? What makes you smile when you see it? Who are the people who you love in life, and what are the activities you make that make you feel really good? Now, all of these conversations you need to have with the person when they are in a relatively calm and composed state of mind. So while you create that safety plan, you also explore ways to strengthen their protective factors. So here again, strong relationship, being connected is very important. Feeling connected to others, support from partners and friends and family members goes in a long way. Increasing their skills, particularly problem solving and conflict resolution skills, are good ways to increase the protectiveness. So if you are a working professional, or if you are in this space, finding ways to increase their protective factors, which include relationship management, continuing or staying with the treatment plan, follow up and being consistent about their psychotherapy appointments, taking their medication on time, encouraging them to pursue religious beliefs or personal beliefs that are against suicide, ensuring that they have good access to mental health or other behavioral healthcare professionals is important. Another technique that we use as mental health professionals is called the Hope Kit. Now, this is something that is quite similar to the safety plan, except it's an actual physical box. So when you feel trapped or overwhelmed by feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, and worthlessness, this hope box is used to help you feel better. Again, it's a CBT technique that helps you tide over a crisis by reminding you why your life is worth living. So in this Hope Kit, you put your safety plan, which you created earlier, your help-seeking plan, and you also put your reminders from the past, events and people that made you happy and hopeful. So it could be, notes, gratitude list, or something, a photograph that invokes joy. You bring in your inspirations from the present. So your quotes, stories, a living note. Living note is like a letter you write to your future self, or that tells you how to tide over the crisis, and or a letter that you write to yourself to reassure that everything will be fine, or a note that talks about how far you've come in your journey, in your growth. So these are reminders from the present, and then you put you put in objects that bring in inspirations, your optimism for the future. These are objects that are symbolic of the events that you're looking forward to. It could be, your graduation, a trip, something, objects that are, symbolic of something you want to do in the future. Again, you put a list of reasons you want to stay alive. I want to travel the world. I have to take care of my parents. I want to finish my master's degree. I want to set up this NGO to take care of this. So all of those things. And then you put in your things that serve as your distraction. So puzzles, art material, anything that can take your mind off the current crisis. Maybe even the picture of your dog to remind him to take him for a walk, or take him to the spa, something that serves as a distraction. And again, along with the safety plan, you also make sure you put in your connections there. So using the safety hope box, you're reminded to attend to your safety and emotional needs at this point of time. The third technique that we use. So the Hope Kit and the safety plan are designed and used when you are not in an active, you are suicidal, and these are you use these techniques to find a way to keep yourself safe. Now, despite all the efforts, the person in question is still experiencing serious suicidal thoughts and feelings. This would mean that it's a time to intervene, time to involve others, and limit their means to go through with the act. Now, the active suicide crisis is very short-lived. It spans a few hours, a few days. And the symptoms include like frantic hopelessness, loss of cognitive control, where they feel like they're going down a rabbit hole, and there's acute social withdrawal. So there are 5 key indicators or 5 symptoms. One is entrapment, where they feel the need for escape, or they feel loss of control and inability to change their situation. Second could be panic or dissociation, where they feel like they are no longer in connection with reality, or they are so dissociated that they feel that they are not in control anymore. Third is ruminative flooding, which means that there is, uncontrolled and raising thoughts over and over again. And it is accompanied by certain physical symptoms like headaches and severe pressure in the head. And there is emotional pain, feelings of extreme psychic and anguish, and the fear of dying. So the conscious fears of sudden death. So these are some of 5 indicators that are that constitute what is called as a suicide crisis. At that point of time, it is important that we put them on a suicide watch. This is where We spoke earlier about how it is important to create a team, a number of people from their friends and family members who can come together and keep an eye on the person and do not, for the next 24 to 72 hours. In fact, there's been study done to understand the duration that a person of suicidal deliberation. So, more than 60% said that duration lasts between 5 to 1 hour. It's only about about 30% of the people for whom it lasted more than 2 hours to a few days. So during this time, we put them on a suicide watch. We make sure the people who are aware of their crisis are, we bring into their attention that the person is in a crisis. And it is important we take turns to be with the person completely 24 hours, all through the time. And we make sure that there are no sharp objects or ligature items in their surroundings, or there's no drug or alcohol. At the same time, if they're on any medication, we make sure that they're taking it on time and regularly. It's important that the people who are a part of the suicide watch is aware of their triggers, is aware of the ways that they want to be helped at the time of their crisis. You do not leave them unescorted. You don't allow them to drive. You don't allow them to operate on any heavy machinery. Especially at night times, it's important that you're with them and you're checking on them as often as possible. Nighttime, it's important that you are, keeping awake vigil with them, where they are getting as much sleep as they can. But those who are part of the suicide watch is awake and focused on that individual. It's important that you have a conversation, as you're talking to them, when you're talking to that person, again, use your compassionate and respectful skills, and conversations should focus on the things that keep them safe now, rather than the triggers or the things that put them at this risk. Encourage the person to talk about their personal strengths and qualities in a way to refocus on their protective factors. So these are some of the key techniques, or the 3 important techniques that even as professionals we use in our practice. And these are the techniques that all of us as lay people can also use in our conversations with people who may be experiencing suicidal crisis. If you are dealing with somebody who's a survivor of suicide attempt, it's excuse me. It's very natural for us to worry about whether it's okay to bring it up, whether we're saying the wrong things, what is their reaction, what is their mental status time. So again, it's important that you're patient. It may take time for them to open up and feel comfortable discussing what has happened. If they do, listen closely if they share their story. When someone wants to open up their story, it takes a lot of courage and trust in you for them to do so. So the best thing you can do for them at that time is to, actively listen, instead of interrupting or asking any intrusive or invasive questions, or interrogating them, but at the same time giving them that full safety and space to express their thoughts and feelings, because there is no one story that fits all. It's okay. I think it is important for us to, say that we don't know what to say. If we don't know what to say, sometimes all a person needs to know is that you're there for them and you care about them. It's not so much about, are you going to say the right things? You don't have to say much. You just have to offer, basic compassion and a listening ear. And, you could just say that, I don't know what to say, but I'm here for you. And that alone is sufficient. Offer help repeatedly and be very specific because people find it very hard to reach out to for help, even though you've offered to be there. So, a simple "let me know if you need anything" will not suffice. Check on them as often as possible. Offer them help repeatedly so that they know. Like, you can say that if you need any help picking up your kids from school, I'll be there, or offer like, I can help you, with some home cooked meals, or restock their fridge, or anything very. Try and be as specific as you can in terms of being helpful. Uh, Again, avoid giving advice. Don't shame or assign blame for their past decision. Do not tell people that they were being selfish or think of them as unstable. We need to remember that they've already faced enough disconnection and discrimination and stigma from the society. They don't need us to add to it. And most importantly, don't despair. The months after the initial shock wears off, initially there will be people around them, but afterwards people go back into their everyday lives and they sometimes feel left alone. So it's important that you continue to check in on them and let them know that you care, so that being there for them is not only being there in that limited time, it is also being there at a longer time. Now, if you are a part of, if they are somebody who is from your organization or from your institution, it's important that you help. Like, we know that when they have attempted, it is because they felt a disconnect with the world. So helping them reconnect with their world is an important way of showing support and care for somebody who is, a survivor. Again, I think I've covered most of what is there here. I just want to remind I just want to talk about the last point now. It is important that as we are there with the person over an extended period of time, you have to also follow up on and note the progress they've made, especially if they're taking therapy, and continuing to encourage them to take therapy, and celebrate the small wins because they are as important. Noting things like they're going to work despite their depression, or they've taken, they're not drinking, or if they've gone into rehab, or they are finding ways to get in touch and stay in touch with their friends, or they are avoiding friends who were triggers. So these are some of the small things that we consider as recovery wins, and it's important that you reaffirm and celebrate these recovery wins with them. If you have a more deeper conversation or a relationship with the person who is a survivor, exploring with them these questions can be important. But again, the caveat here is that we use these questions, or we have these conversations with them only if we are in a deep relationship, because this is not to be taken lightly. These are things that can be triggering. So asking them about the impact, about their lived experience, asking them, trying to understand it. When are the times that they have felt particularly vulnerable? Or what are some of the triggers that can be, or what are some of the words or conversations that can be particularly triggering? Asking, excuse me. So asking these questions, and I've just listed these questions so that it's there available for all of you, but this has to be weaved in compassionately into your conversation. And last but not the least, the most important thing you can do when you're taking care of someone or dealing with someone who is struggling with suicidality is taking care of yourself. Who are the other trusted friends and family members you can involve? Uh, you can involve. Understanding your limitations, understanding your boundaries are very important. Sometimes family and friends can do everything in their power to help a loved one. However, a suicide attempt or a death by suicide is not something that we can completely prevent. So in this case, it's important for you to know that it is not your fault, and that those with strong suicidal thoughts are suffering from illness that you are not responsible for treating or preventing. So it is imperative that you do not blame yourself or others in this situation. At the same time, get the necessary support for yourself. And if you are taking or supporting someone who cares for a person who has attempted suicide, often we don't know what to say or wonder if we can mention suicide. But so the fear of saying the wrong thing can stop people from saying anything at all. And that can cause for the person who's caring feel very unsupported. So if you are in connection with somebody who's a carer, check in with the person regularly, not just immediately the period after the attempt, but as you know, be in touch with them. It's likely that as a carer, they are going to be impacted for a very long time, and they may not have a lot of people looking out for them. So, you need to consider how you can support them. Again, knowing your own limits is important. Understand what you can and cannot do as a carer. If you are the person who's caring for the person who's suicidal, having an understanding about what you can and cannot do is important, and understanding what the person you care for can and cannot do is also important. Keep an eye on your own health, well-balanced diet, physical activity, all of these, and knowing when to take a break. The person you care for may have a very challenging and complex behavior, and this can cause a lot of stress between you and the person. And if you're living together, it's important to set out certain house rules and encourage the person you're supporting to be as independent and taking as much part in everyday activities. Communicate your limits, especially when they are at a calm state. Communicating your limits, like my preferred mode of communication is WhatsApping, so please don't call me, or telling them that I'm not available during these hours of the day. So if you will need extra support outside of that time, who else can you reach out to? Or even communicating to them topics that are triggering for you. So you can say that these topics are triggering for me, so please ask me before you share with them. Or sometimes letting them know that there are certain things that you are not okay to do with. I care about you, but I can't talk to you if you are yelling at me, or I can't talk to you while you're hurting yourself, or I can't talk to you when you're not sober. So please have a plan on who you will reach out to instead. So knowing and communicating these limits are important, and it's equally important that these limits are communicated to them in respectful and compassionate ways, but at times when they are relatively in a calm and composed state. Yeah, that's it from me.
Hey, thank you so much, Lynn. Oh my God, that I can't believe you managed to pull that off with the health that you're keeping. I'm really sorry to see the struggle that you went through there. But thank you so much. It was super, super informative. Really got a lot of insight as well from that. Any questions, guys? Please feel free to share in the chat box. Okay, Lynn. So there was a question in between that had come up. And Lynn, if you need help, just settle as well. Just feel free. You don't have to talk anymore. So even if you feel like responding to something in chat, or maybe even I can respond. So don't take too much stress, okay? So the first question is just curious whether there's a thing like too much care. is it wise to give them personal space and not be by their side 24/7? I think this is when you were explaining about um, the moment, the 48 hours, the 72 hours of a person being highly prone to suicide. That means they're really in a very highly overwhelmed state. So the attempt is inevitable or was in progress and was stopped. And that's where that suicide watch conversation kind of came up. And you had mentioned how it would be good for people around them to kind of take turns to kind of know where they are and stuff. So I think the question here is like, is it okay? Won't they need some personal space if they want to? Do we really need to be next to them for 24/7, or can we offer them some personal space? And I guess if there is some personal space to be offered, what sort of conditions are we looking at there?
So the idea is to check in, so be in the same space as they are, but not necessarily in the same room. So if they're at home, be in the same house. If they are in their bedroom, just request that they do not keep their door locked. Just gently knock and check in on them, or or encourage them to leave the door a little ajar. But you don't have to like physically stare down their neck at all times. But at night, it is important that you check in on them as often as possible and be in the same physical space. I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Make sure they're eating on time. If they're sleeping, leave them alone.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So basically, essentially saying that it's not implying that you have to be breathing down their neck for that entire duration. It is mainly just to ensure that they know that they are not alone.
Yes.
And that isolation, the thing that we were talking about earlier, that can be, again, a very high factor for rumination and things like that. So this is just kind of letting you know what can be happening on the other side. So again,
it's not only about not isolation, it's also letting them know that you care so much that you're going to be there, prevent them from behaving in a way that, taking behaviors that are harmful for them. That information itself is very reassuring for a lot of people.
Yeah. So over here, it's again important to kind of see that it's a very heightened emotional state that the person is experiencing at that point of time. So that is precisely the reason why, because there can be, mountains and valleys in that, in the way that emotional state is bouncing at that time. So it is just in that regard kind of being there. And mainly for this, it's not that someone has mentioned that they are having suicidal thoughts and now you are just around them the whole time. What Lynn was referring to was specifically also the time of attempt. So if someone has reached that state that they have attempted it, or they are on the verge of attempting it. So it's in those conditions specifically. Thank you, Lynn. Janam, thank you for the question as well. If there's more, please feel free. So there's one. How do you respond to someone who has a history of suicidal ideation, currently stable, and asks for space? Does one still check in on them or allow them to reach out to you?
Checking on them, always checking on them, but in a non-intrusive and in non-invasive manner.
So this is also important, right? Checking in on them, but again, also not making it like overtly visible in that way. Like, look at me, I'm checking on you, and being that. So this is again what Lynn said about compassionate inquiry, right? How you are being compassionate about this. It's not about showing the person that I'm keeping an eye on you. You better be careful and not do this. It's not like a chowkidar sitting on your head, but a person who really cares about you, just checking in, not like, hey, are you still alive? But checking in like, hey, I'm still here. Is there anything I can get you? Or do you wanna talk or anything like that? Just checking in, or maybe even
or maybe even like a follow-up. You could say that, I remember you had mentioned that you were preparing for an interview. I just was wanting to know how did the interview go, or I'm just checking in on to see how's your mom's health. Just you can pick up on the conversation that was you had in the past and pick up from there as well.
Yeah, but also there's this one specific bit in this question, right? That this is someone who had a history of suicidal ideation. So it's not that they are currently experiencing suicidal ideation.
Even so.
And then ask for space as well, right? Even in this condition, the person has asked for space. So be more careful about that inquiry as well. So maybe if you were asking, checking in on them or saying hello every day, maybe you can do it in every 2 or 3 days. So just increasing that time in between what you're checking in. And also because, see, you will have
even a
yeah,
small WhatsApp message,
yeah,
will work just as well.
yeah. But
Sachin, I I need to
go.
leave.
Yes.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say thank you, Sachin, for inviting me, and all the organizers and the participants here. Thank you so much for this
No,
opportunity.
thank you so much for coming over and even, taking this session in spite of the really bad throat that you were having. And it was fantastic. I think a lot of us got a lot to learn. I think even from Sam's team, we would have had a lot of lessons to take as well. So thank you so much for sharing that information, all that knowledge with us, right? And hopefully we'll catch you soon.
Bye. Have a good day, all of you.
Take care. Take care. Lynn. Right. So where we are talking about here, um, asking for space as well. Do just check the motivation you're having, why you're asking this question. What's your motivation for checking in on them, right? If it is just anxiety or worry, then please understand that it is also visible to the person, right? So try to be there on hey, I'm here, kind of a place, rather than oh my god, and anxiety and worry kind of coming through. So do take help for yourself as well while you're being there for someone else, and just to make sure it's not overwhelming you. Sunita, Rohit, you're here as well. Great.
Yeah, sir, just a small addition to this. Also, especially in these sort of situations where you might be one of the only few people who is there to check in or offer that sort of support, and let's say you have given space, you do reach out, after giving some space, and you receive a mildly irritated response or something. Uh, you also need to have some sort of capacity to not take that personally, in the sense that, like, if the person who may have said that you don't need to check in on me or something like that, and you after some time do in all the nice ways, do everything correct, no, all okay, but they still maybe show some irritation, like, not taking that personally will again be helpful there, because it's like again, like, you are one of maybe the only few people they are interacting with. So it's like, not all emotion coming from them is only going to be positive. So you might receive some maybe irritation or something like that. So just being able to deal with that in a compassionate manner also is helpful in that situation, where it's not to be taken personally, like, oh, I did something wrong by checking in. No, you were still right to check in, and even if the other person did respond with some sort of irritation, you don't know how later on they might feel towards that. Later on they might still be like, no, at least that person always checks in on me. You don't know that. So it's always better to not take that very personally, and to still take that in some measured way.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think it's leading on to the next question as well. If the person is abusive and the person who wants to help them, then what do we do? So over here as well, right? From what Lynn said as well, knowing your boundaries is also quite important here. You are someone there to be providing emotional support or being there for someone else. And while they're going through a really tough time, and mind you, it is a very tough time to deal with, right? So while you're being there for someone, if that is coming across abusive towards you, if there is any violence, and any of that emotional outburst has a physical nature, even emotionally abusive nature towards you, it's not here saying that be compassionate to that. It's about understanding what your boundaries are is also very important, because again, Sunita had also mentioned how it's very easy to get burnt out yourself as well, right? While you're being supportive to someone else. Even something as simple as having to listen to the same story maybe for the 50th time, because the person may be in that space, right? And having to be listening to that same thing for so many times, it can by itself be burning out. So being compassionate, but also being able to set down boundaries, being able to express to them, especially when they are at a calmer state, kind of expressing to them that, hey, by the way, I may not be available from this to this. By the way, talking the conversation around this particular person's death, or at this particular topic of abuse or anything like that, is it possible that you may not speak about that particular thing? That maybe we can introduce one more person. Maybe you can talk about this to that person, right? Now, I know this is sounding very organized, but this is where we need to be as well. Because if we are in a supportive space, but we are constantly worried, anxious, upset with the person themselves and everything, right? It will be really difficult for us to maintain that compassion as well. So taking care of yourself, knowing your boundaries, communicating those boundaries are very, very important. It does not make you a bad person or a selfish person because, oh my God, the person in front of me has suicidal ideation, so their need trumps all is also not something we are taking away as a message. You still have an existence, you still have your needs and things that you need to convey. And that will help that relation of support to continue for a longer time without, possible burnouts and everything, if that makes sense, right? Yes, Sunita, you wanted to add something?
Oh, I think you said it all, because I just wanted to repeat the word respect, because respect is like a two-way process in any kind of meaningful communication. No matter what is the support you're offering to the other person, the grounding is respect. So you are not there for them out of pity. You are there. We spoke a lot when we spoke about self-harm and suicide. We said conveying respect and acceptance. So one experience that we have repeatedly really experienced is empathy. So we are conveying empathy when we are listening, but empathy is also very often a two-way street. So the other person also starts feeling empathetic towards you. So why I'm saying this is our boundaries are just as important as that person's need. So not to sacrifice yourself and not to forget that respect is the basis on which the entire meaningful sharing is happening. And don't be alone in this. We have, I think, repeated that throughout. There are many people who are going to be there to offer support. If it's going to be on you and only you, then you need to question, is there respect there, or is it just some kind of a manipulative need as well?
Right. Great. So I think those were the questions as such. I think we have covered them. Unless anyone else has any questions, please feel free to either, again, continue. Maybe you can continue messaging in the chat, or you can even raise your hand, and we would love to hear your questions from you as well. And I'll help unmute you. If anyone would like to share anything from your side, please feel free to do that as well. If there is no question, if there is something you would like to share, if anyone wants to share any takeaway that they have from today's conversation, feel free to share that too. Will it help? Let me see. Will it help if I stop the recording? So with that, we stop the recording.